One of the real horror classics has just been remade, and for somebody that never played the original, this one is going to be a real treat to cover. We'll be breaking down the story of Silent Hill 2 in all of its creepy glory. Get yourself a snack and relax, because this will be a good one. Let's get into the video. Our first scene shows a man in an incredibly run-down bathroom, clearly dealing with some crap. I mean, when you're looking at your hands like they're brand new and touching your face like that, it's never good. We hear some of his internal dialogue as he asks if Mary could really be in this town, and we are greeted with some incredible scenery as we're officially in the middle of nowhere. Mary begins narrating, explaining how when she dreams, she still sees this tiny town of Silent Hill, mentioning how James promised to take her there again someday, but he never did, and she is now alone there in their special place waiting for him. James explains that he received a letter with a name on it, saying Mary, his wife's name. But the one problem with that is that Mary died of a disease 3 years ago. He struggles to understand why he's looking for her, not knowing what she even meant by the special place, since this entire town was their special place. Could she really be here and actually be alive? It's hiking time for James as we head down towards Silent Hill. This sort of territory is just asking for a mountain lion or a slip to make this a very short horror story. After a short walk, we arrive at Silent Hill Cemetery and stumble across a young lady looking at some of the headstones. James gives her a heart attack and asks her for directions to Silent Hill, since it's pretty darn foggy out here. She shows him the path but warns him to stay away, saying that there is something wrong with this town. She struggles to explain, saying that it's dangerous. James understands but tells her that he doesn't care if it's dangerous, since he's looking for someone that was very close to him. She mentions that she is also looking for someone, her mother, and is confused since she thought that her father and brother were here too, but she can't seem to find them. She does take a quick glimpse at the headstones while saying this, so I think she was looking for their graves, not them in the flesh. They wish each other good luck as James continues down the path, and boy oh boy, this place is like a 10 on the creepy meter with all this fog. Everything looks almost abandoned at the Silent Hill Ranch. Some breaking and entering later for a key, and we can see a picture of Mary in James's pocket. Take a mental image. It'll come back later. We arrive at the outskirts of town, and you really would think that they would have a more welcoming entrance. You know, a welcome to Silent Hill sign with a big turkey mascot giving a thumbs up or something. Instead, we just get the feeling that we're going to be murdered. We find a rundown flower shop with a note mentioning a customer that came in today, asking for red and white flowers, which is apparently bad luck. The guy seemed off and stared at the store clerk like she wasn't even there, and said that he would pick up the flowers later and ended up leaving. Near the exit is a very ominous trail of, something red. I don't want to assume, but I think we know what that might be. We find a map that will help us through the literal ghost town. What I find even more interesting though is these walls blocking the outskirts of town. Giant scaffolding walls lined with white sheets to stop people from getting in, or getting out. We head more towards the center of town and see our first sign of life, if you could call it that. James decides to follow that thing into the fog. Now, that is a very questionable decision there, James. Did you see that thing? At worst, that is a terrifying monster. At best, that is a crackhead. And would I be following a crackhead into the fog of a deserted town? Hell no. I'm going to keep a questionable decision tally here for James, because let me tell you, he makes a hell of a lot of them. This thing is making grunting noises and leaving behind flesh piles. But what the heck, let's follow it like a lost puppy. Holy Christ. I think we now know what left that red trail at the flower shop. This thing left a literal hole in the garage door, and we are crawling in after it? I know this is technically still the same thing, but I'm adding another one to the tally for James here for not backing away. Once inside, a radio is giving off some serious static and we investigate. Our friend from earlier arrives and ooh, that is something much worse than I imagined. James gets to work sending that thing to the grave and we keep the radio with us, since it seems to be giving off feedback whenever one of those things is nearby. A voice comes over the radio but is badly broken up. It definitely calls out for James and asks to find them, but the rest is hard to make out. We stumble across the first victim of the town looking a bit worse for wear. He has a note nearby that tells the reader to leave, saying that Silent Hill isn't what it seems and to run away. To be honest, the dead guy has spoken the most amount of sense thus far. There are many more of these body bag looking creatures throughout the town, but it doesn't stop us from doing some exploring. We find the town library that has a cutout from a news article. It mentions how the Maine Psychical Research Association visited Silent Hill in 1965. It concluded that the area around the Wiltsey coal mine to be highly active with paranormal activity and wanted to do more research around the gorge. They were denied, however, since the area was a historic nature reserve as declared by the Silent Hill Historical Society. Not to mention the local community didn't like the idea that it could hinder tourist activity to the town. I will be straight up here. If your town is known for being haunted, it is almost definitely going to get more tourist visits than before. People love ghost stories. We head over towards the local bar and can see a message on the window, saying how there was once a hole here and now it's gone, with much of the windows covered. A nearby note explains that somebody in the bar started smashing the jukebox, with the staff not knowing what got into him. He ran off saying how he would fix everything. Between this and the flower shop guy, it's clear something odd is going on with the residents of the town. We check the jukebox, which has certainly seen better days. If we want to play our favourite tunes, we're going to have to track down the guy that stole the button and half of this vinyl. James heads towards the nearby apartment building, as mentioned on the note. Why we are fixing some random jukebox is beyond me. That's another questionable decision there, James. We are looking for your dead wife, man, alright? Keep your eyes on the prize. Each of the apartments are of course abandoned and run down, but we do hear noises coming from upstairs, which is not a great sign. I will say that it does feel good to be above street level, out of the fog and watching over those creatures. Well, it was nice while it lasted. We find the guy's apartment with a note saying that it was something in this place, and that he needed to get his head straight before making his way to the bar. In his bathroom is a big hole in the wall, which is very odd to say the least. The door that leads to the room on the other side is filled with a black ooze or oil-like substance. Now, why would you have a hole in your wall in your bathroom? This guy is either freaky as all hell or he's hiding something. James, I guess, counts on it being the latter as he sticks his arm in there to feel around. That is definitely a questionable decision. Who knows the diseases that you could have caught from that? We get the jukebox button and make some quick stops around town, including a diner called Big J's. Inside is a note mentioning once again an issue with some man. It mentions how they were warned not to come back here, but he seemed to act like he didn't know what they were talking about. Thankfully, he left without issue, but the staff member mentioned how he gave him the creeps, saying that looking at his face was almost like looking at a mask. Something was hiding beneath, waiting to come out. We broke into the town vinyl store, which hit me like a truck. This is probably the biggest sign this game has that shows that it is old. Even saying vinyl store sounds weird. We get the other piece of the broken vinyl and head back to the jukebox within the bar. The vinyl is A Long Way Home. Now, it doesn't actually play this song when it's actually put into the jukebox, but there is a song called The Long Way Home by legend Neil Diamond. And the lyrics to this song seem fitting. Due to what we actually have done thus far, I'll be reading this because there's no way in hell I'm singing. Girl, I took the long way home, it's true. The long way home to you. And I want to say I'm home to stay. Ran a lot. Don't know what I thought I would find. Town to town, all I found was you on my mind. I do think that this is a reference to this particular song, since the lyrics fit the story of Silent Hill almost to a T. Listening to the song gives James a flashback to an area within the town, the Silent Hill Park, near the lake. A place that James and Mary spent the whole day just watching the water together. He believes that this could be the special place that Mary mentioned in her letter. A note at the back of the bar mentions that same guy that broke the jukebox, saying that when he came back, he mentioned that he was leaving town with somebody, pointing out his vehicle colour and number plate and to go and check his vehicle. We do just that, and find a bunch of bloody clothing. Within it is a key to his apartment at the Woodside Apartments, and we get ambushed by a bunch of creatures, but James manages to make it out alive. We arrive at the apartment building and find a map. This is going to be one hell of an Easter egg hunt. We head upstairs and wander into one of the apartment rooms, and it's filled with mannequins, and one of them has a bright flashlight attached to it. We take that for ourselves and get jump scared by this abomination of a creature. A quick look at the mannequin which had the flashlight will reveal that it is wearing clothing that is very familiar. It is eerily similar to the outfit that Mary was wearing in her photo and in James's flashback. We come across a news article talking about a murder of 2 siblings within the town and how the perpetrator actually killed themselves while in custody. Walter Sullivan, culprit and suspect in the murder, was found dead in his jail cell after severing his own carotid artery with a soup spoon, buried 2 inches in his neck. This, of course, is after his recent arrest for the murders of siblings Billy and Miriam Locane. The police questioned some of Walter's old schoolmates, which mention how Walter was very paranoid before his arrest, blurting out strange stuff like, "He's trying to kill me, he's trying to punish me, the monster, the red devil, forgive me, I did it, but it wasn't me." We continue going room to room in the apartment building before finding a key behind some bars. As James goes to reach for it, a young girl kicks the keys away and steps on his hand. Firstly, rude as all hell. Secondly, not a great place for children to be wandering around with all these creatures slithering about. We make it to a room that thankfully has a pistol inside, making our investigation a little bit more safe. The gun owner, however, has seen much better days, left slouched in his chair watching the television. He is not the only deceased person within the building, however, after we find this guy getting a little too comfortable with his fridge. Sounds of vomiting can be heard nearby in the apartment, and we find a young man in the bathroom. He proclaims that he didn't do anything and that the guy was dead when he got here. He is all kinds of messed up. I mean, he's sweating and there's vomit all over his clothes. James asks if he lives here, and Eddie tells him that he isn't from Silent Hill, that he is here because somebody brought him here, that they came at him and he didn't know what to do, so he ran to Silent Hill. James tells him that there is something really wrong with this town, and that he should look to get out of here when he can. Eddie asks James to come with him, since together they may have a better chance of actually getting out of the town. But James denies him, saying that he can't leave yet, that he still needs to find someone. We get into apartment 201 and find a napkin on the table. This napkin, however, feels familiar to James before a creature falls to the ground behind him. Taking a peek around the corner reveals a person with a pyramid head, wrestling with another of the creatures. James hides in a nearby closet, and is that thing dabbing on us right now? What the hell? The scene gets tense as Pyramid Head stares straight at the closet that James is hiding in. James holds up his gun and decides to shoot through the door at the metal helmet. I will put this down as another questionable decision. Firstly, it didn't act yet. Secondly, it's a metal helmet. At least aim for the body, James. It makes more strange movements, grabbing at the helmet, and decides to leave James unharmed, grabbing the creature and dragging them through the nearby red door. Now, I have a question for you all. What would you do in this situation? Run out the front door and get as far away from this place as possible? No? Well, how about following the indestructible creature through the red door? Yep, add that one to the tally. The door takes us to the next door apartment building, which seems to be much more run down than the previous one. Metal grates on the walls, wallpaper decaying, and everything is in a great deal of disrepair. Within one of the rooms is the young girl from the cemetery, lying down staring at a big window with a knife in her hand. The young woman's name is Angela. James mentions to her that he isn't sure what she's doing, but reminds her that if it is what he thinks it is, there is always another way. Angela disagrees, saying that there is no point, saying that it's easier to run and it's what they all deserve, saying that James and her are all the same. James asks if she's found her mother, but she replies that she hasn't yet. James goes on to ask if her mother lived in the building, but once again, Angela states that she just doesn't know. James asks that if the only thing that she does know is that her mother lived somewhere in this town then. This gets Angela oddly defensive, asking how James could know that, but he explains that it's just basic deduction. She apologizes and asks if he's found who he was looking for yet, which he also explains that he hasn't. He shows her a picture of Mary and explains that she is his wife, saying how he doesn't know why he thinks that she's here since she actually died 3 years ago. This confuses Angela, but James assures her that he isn't crazy. Angela gets frantic, saying that she needs to find her mother, and James asks if he should go with her, but she tells him that she is fine. Before she has a chance to leave, James points out the knife, opting to hold onto it for Angela since, well, she can't trust herself with it. Things get a little weird when he tries to grab it, however, as she lunges and then immediately apologizes, saying that she's been bad, before storming out. Throughout the hallways are now slice marks in the walls and floor that were not there previously. Not only that, but the building itself seems to be degrading more and more as we get further through it. It isn't long before we run into our Pyramid Head friend again, and judging by that weapon of his, I would take a guess as to who the culprit was for the big slices in the walls and floors. This time he is not as forgiving, and a fight ensues. It begins to look bad for James until a siren can be heard, and it immediately takes his attention away and Pyramid Head just leaves. Thankfully, James takes the hint this time and leaves the building, and we wander back around the town. We stumble across the same young girl from earlier that stepped on James's hand. She is sitting, staring at a letter, and is not very accommodating to James, calling him a dum-dum. James asks if her parents never taught her any manners, which clearly strikes a chord with the young girl as she goes quiet. James asks about the letter in her hand, and she tells him that it's none of his business, since he doesn't really love Mary anyway, and she runs away. This surprises James since he's never told her about his wife and never mentioned her name. We continue towards the park, the area which James believes is the special place that his wife was referring to in the letter. Once we get there, a lady is actually standing there. When she turns around, James mistakes her for Mary, but quickly realizes that she was mistaken. He is shocked by the woman since she resembles Mary both in her appearance, but also in her voice. The woman introduces herself as Maria, and attempts to touch James's face, but he quickly tries to leave, saying that he needs to find his wife. He explains to her the story, how his wife died 3 years ago from a disease and that he's received a letter from her recently. Maria asks what the letter said, and James explains about the special place that Mary mentioned, and how he was clearly incorrect on the location. Maria says that she hasn't seen her before, asking about other places that she could have considered special. James isn't sure, but feels that there is somewhere, but he's struggling to remember. Maria points out a nearby place that could fit the bill that lovers typically go to. She does once again try to put the moves on James, acting and speaking seductively to him. He brushes her off, before she tells him that she will lead him to a place that she mentioned before. James is reluctant to go with her, but Maria guilt trips him again, asking if he would actually let her leave alone with all these monsters walking around. Or if the reason he wants to leave her behind is because Maria reminds him of his dead wife. James concedes and agrees to go with her. I love how James will follow a giant pyramid-head creature with a 10-foot sword into a deserted building complex without a second thought, but following a woman will take some real convincing. We take a quick detour through a motel since the majority of the road is now within a sinkhole, with Maria again trying to tempt James into staying for a while in one of the rooms, and asking if she would look good in this outfit that she finds in a wardrobe. This girl is really laying it on thick. While in the lobby, Maria gets attacked by a creature and James needs to quickly help. Thankfully, we have John Wick-like reflexes, and she thanks James for saving her life. We find a mansion nearby that Maria refuses to enter, saying how the place gives her the creeps. James asks if she's ever been inside, and Maria answers that she isn't sure, but it sure feels familiar, like a bad memory. This is a nod towards the Silent Hill 2 Born from a Wish DLC from the original game, which is set within this very manor named the Baldwin Manor. And some pretty crazy stuff takes place there. Hopefully the DLC gets remade as well, because I would love to break that story down also. The streets are filled with creatures, and James and Maria have no choice but to look for cover. Not to mention the fog and the weather are deteriorating. We get to a back door of a building which is locked, but luckily Maria has a key to the building. What luck. It turns out that the building is a local strip club, Maria's old workplace. James gets frustrated, asking if this was the special place that she was talking about. Maria jokes that it isn't, but asks if they can take a break and spend some time together at the club. James of course refuses and gets annoyed. Maria guilt trips him once again, saying that she needs a break from the monsters, and James reluctantly agrees to a very short break. He asks her if he is crazy for thinking that his wife is still alive and in Silent Hill. Maria says that she thinks that another word is more appropriate, hopeful. She pours them both a drink to take the edge off, but James denies the drink, much to Maria's surprise. James stares at the glass as they begin to leave, clearly showing that he has had an issue with alcohol in the past. The weather has now gotten better and we continue towards the area that Maria mentioned, another park with more statues. James points out that he hasn't been here before. Maria shows him a statue within the garden and mentions the story around the statue, which I think is a pretty vital story point, so pay attention. It's a local Silent Hill legend of a young woman that was exiled to an island out on the lake to die after being found guilty of a crime. A man in the town, however, was madly in love with her, and every night he would sneak out, row across the lake, and bring her food so she wouldn't starve. He would also bring her his company. And each night she would stand there on the shore with a lit candle to help guide him through the night towards the island. This was until one night a terrible storm broke out. It blew out the candle, but the man wouldn't give up, choosing to continue to fight against the waves and find his own way to shore. But after a while he grew tired and eventually the lake took him. Even after that, the woman never lost hope, continuing to go to shore each day with a lit candle to lead her beloved home to shore. This is most likely a fairy tale with no real historical evidence for it to be real. James gets frustrated, saying how Mary isn't here, and wonders why he even came here at all since he's never actually come to this place before. Maria comforts him, saying that there are many places in Silent Hill that she could be referring to. They hear a young girl scream and take off towards it. They deduce that it came from the movie theatre, and James goes inside to check it out while Maria keeps watch outside. When we're inside, we can hear a little girl and Eddie speaking with each other. Eddie makes fun of her for screaming at a rat and the two banter between themselves. The girl asks Eddie why he is sitting in here, saying that he mentioned to her that the cops are looking for him. But Eddie mentions that he barricaded the doors so he doesn't have to worry about anybody getting into the building. James makes a loud noise when moving a cabinet from the door and spooks the young girl. When we get into the main seating area, only Eddie remains, going to town on a bucket of ice cream. Damn, no spoon or anything, straight fingers and hands. Ugh, gross, dude. He doesn't remember James at first, but he does after James reminds him. James points out that it's good to see that Eddie has his appetite back, which causes him to change his mood. The camera shuts off and Eddie points out that it was likely Laura was just messing around, in a very serial killer kind of way, might I add. James goes to find her and asks if Eddie is going to come with him. Eddie quickly refutes James, asking if he actually wants him to go with him this time, clearly upset about James's earlier refusal to team up at the apartments. James leaves and Eddie goes back to munching down on his melted ice cream. We find Laura in the camera room, but she continues to run whenever James gets close, running outside and past Maria. They continue to follow her down the street until they see her entering the Brookhaven Hospital. Inside we get a map, and once again we got some exploring to do. We find Laura again, drawing on the walls of the staircase before she takes off upstairs. She locks the doors and the only way up is via the elevator, which means that we need power. James and Maria head downstairs and refuel the generator, fighting through creatures in the process. We get the elevator working and head upstairs, but Maria seems to be having some problems, entering a nearby patient room. She is breathing heavily and mentions to James how she isn't feeling well and needs a moment to rest. James decides to continue his search for Laura while she does. She asks James what he will do if he cannot find Mary, but he tells her that he hasn't thought about that and just leaves. We find a voice recording speaking about 3 special cases within the hospital. The doctor refers to them as 3 hopeless cases, saying that they require diligence, discipline, trial and error, before stating that he will find what ails them and he will cure them. We continue looking around the hospital before James finds a hole in the wall, and for some goddamn reason, he thinks it's a great idea to climb down between the wall in the tightest place ever. Honestly, this is the scariest thing I've seen yet. Add another one to the tally. He falls, of course, and is literally the luckiest person ever, by the way, falling down to a hole in the wall with a cabinet that he can push over. What was the plan there, James? A painful, long death in between the walls? We find some documents on 3 patients that I mentioned earlier. Firstly, patient 50. Their symptoms consist of sudden outbursts of aggression and visual and auditory hallucinations. The diagnosis, however, has reverted, saying that the patient is declining suddenly. The doctor notes that things that once helped are no longer having any effect. Patient 90 is having sensory delusions with insomnia and is not drinking or eating. This patient needs constant surveillance and is force-fed and bathed. Patient 130 is having intense and unrelenting anxiety and paranoia, along with visual hallucinations. The doctor points out that they cannot be left alone and also need closer monitoring. While I think we are heading into theory territory here, which I tend to try and avoid, I will be coming back to these 3 notes at the end of the video. We head upstairs and find Laura again drawing on the walls. She once again runs off, telling James to go away, but this man is on a mission. We find another write-up about patient 90, the one with sensory delusions, insomnia, not eating, etc. It points out how they were transferred to observation, malnourished, shallow breathing, and avoids eye contact, agitated in the presence of staff, and frantic at the notion of touch. They are force-fed and the malnourishment is getting worse. They also have signs of self-injury. Something is really wrong. Another note seems to be written by patient 90, mentioning how they feed them garbage, rotting meat crawling with maggots. They describe the juices, red and yellow, hitting the back of their throat. They choke and gag until they vomit, but they can still taste it. Now, I don't think the doctors are actually feeding the patients rotten food, but it's clear that the visual hallucinations are pretty severe. They bathe them in filth and blood, piss and bile, rubbing human waste all over their body. They beg for the nurses to stop, but they don't listen. Not to mention that they lock them up with him. He's always there, closer each time. The rot comes with him. Again, keep this in mind, it will all make sense at the end. We get to the rooftop of the building and find a diary page in a small room. It is a patient that is struggling to come to terms going home, feeling like something bad will happen when they do. We attempt to leave and get one hell of a jump scare from Mr. Pyramid Head, who throws James down the elevator shaft. Somehow, he didn't get any injuries, but we do continue our search now that we're near Laura. We find her as she is playing with a teddy bear. James asks her how she knows about Mary, to which Laura asks what the big deal is. James pleads with her to tell him. She tells him that Mary is her friend and that she met her last year at the hospital. This causes James to actually yell at her, telling her to stop lying, and actually jumps up towards her. He quickly apologizes for the outburst, but Laura is upset that he doesn't believe her and begins to run out of the room. James grabs her arm, telling her that she can't keep running around aimlessly since she might get hurt. She responds, "Hurt by what?" A very important line to slip in here. James convinces Laura to stay with him, but she tells him that she needs to retrieve a letter from Mary that she hid in a nearby room. They go to investigate the room, but Laura quickly locks the door, trapping James inside. He tells her to open the door, but she laughs at him, saying that she is a liar according to him, so why should she? James has another outburst, calling her a brat, and slams the door, but noises of a creature can be heard behind him. He quickly asks Laura to open the door since something is in the room, but she runs off leaving him. We get a look at the creature and oh my god, what the hell is that? Listen, there's some things that even I can't explain. Dealing with this nightmare fuel is tough work, but James does get the better of it. Oh crap, there's a second one. James is taken by the creature and dragged along the ground, staring at the ceiling. Hearing Mary call out to him while an alarm is sounding in the distance. Very similar to the one heard by Pyramid Head. If you pay attention to the different ceilings, things are slowly getting more decrepit. And when James wakes up, we are still within the hospital, but things look a hell of a lot more different. It now resembles the rundown apartment building. Everything is decayed and rotting, and the hallways that were once accessible have now been blocked, with different parts of the floor missing. It's odd to say the least. We head back to the room that contained the written letter from patient 90. Remember the one? Well, now it's changed significantly. It speaks about dancing in sync, and how the music got louder and louder before it all fell silent. Monsters litter the hallways with more letters from patients getting darker and darker. We encounter a room with a box connected to chains which requires solving. James would need to search around the hospital, finding the codes and the key to enter the box. Once we successfully get past the locks, the box is empty. James has to live with his failure, but thankfully something is revealed behind him, the lady of the door. She has an elevator button that will lead to the basement. Next to her is a passage. It says, "She is an angel no one knows, only I can see the lady of the door. They cannot walk along her bridge of thread, they fall from the weight of their crimes, like bloated and ugly corpses. Their sins, she devours them. Sin and sinner alike, she saves me. She is an angel." We enter the elevator, and the speaker turns on with a man talking like he's the host of a game show. He mentions that he will hit the contestant with some Silent Hill trivia, and the prize is ambiguous. If you get all the answers right, then you will have great fortune. If not, it's not very good. He mentions that the contestant is none other than James Sutherland. His first question to James is about a deadly disease that spread across Silent Hill in the 1800s. The bodies of the deceased were thrown into a lake. How many were lost during the plague? 42, 67, or 85? The second question was which road would take you towards the lumberyard and cemetery at the east side of Silent Hill? Bachman Road, Munson Street, or Whitsey Road? The third question, Silent Hill witnessed a gruesome double murder a few years back. A pair of siblings were playing on the side of a road when they were attacked and chopped into pieces with an axe. The young boy was called Billy Locane, but what was the name of his other victim, his sister? Miriam, Heather, or Julia? Now, I want you guys to answer that third question, since I actually brought this murder story up near the beginning of the video. Do you remember the name of the young girl? I'll give you a second. If you chose Miriam, you would be correct. Now, the first two questions I don't expect you to get, since I never actually mentioned those two things previously, since neither of them are hugely significant to the overall story. But for the curious ones out there, the road answer is Whitsey Road, as seen on the map that we found, and the answer to the deadly disease question is 62, as mentioned briefly in some papers. As James is stumbling through the basement, Maria catches back up with him. He immediately mistakes her for Mary again before realizing, and sort of just brushes her off. This annoys Maria, since she nearly got killed back there, and points out that all James cares about is his dead wife. James tries to make her feel better before she hugs him and asks James to stay with her, and not to leave her alone again, since he is supposed to take care of her. The hell? Listen, lady, I get the circumstances and all, but you two have not known each other long enough to have these sorts of responsibilities with each other. She asks James about Laura, to which he explains that he lost her on the 3rd floor. She urges them to look for her again, which prompts James to ask why she even cares so much about this little girl. Maria points out that she doesn't actually know Laura, but she feels sorry for her somehow, and for some reason feels that it's up to her to protect her. We find a jeweled box which represents the questions and answers from the elevator trivia. After correctly answering, we get a bunch of shotgun ammo and some syringes. Oddly anticlimactic. He heads back to the lady of the door and opens it with some rings we found throughout. As we attempt to enter, Maria once again struggles to enter, stating that something doesn't feel right, much like the manor earlier. James reassures her that everything will be fine and escorts her inside. There is no way that you can guarantee that, James. Everything so far has been anything but fine. Add another one to the tally. Would you look at that? We got ourselves a pyramid head chasing us down hallways now. See, James? Play silly games, win silly prizes. We see an elevator at the end of the corridor and make a break for it. But Maria does the classic horror trope and trips before we get there. The doors are closing quickly and James tries to hold them open for her, but Pyramid Head says no, stabbing Maria through the chest right in front of James, killing her. James falls to his knees, taking in what just happened. As we try to contemplate the death of Maria, we can find a book near the hospital exit. It speaks about the illness of hallucinations. The doctor mentions how under the right circumstances, any man or woman could be dragged into what they call the other side, the place that lies beyond the borders of reality and unreality. While it's easy for doctors to say that their imaginings are nothing more than inventions of a busy mind, to the patient there is, well, no other reality. The patient is happy there. So why should he, in good conscience, drag him painfully to the world of our own reality? James hears a noise nearby and we can see that Laura is running down the street in the rain away from the hospital, so he follows. You know what, I know he is still trying to find information about his wife, but just leave the kid alone. This is not working, man, alright? Add another one to the tally. The entire town of Silent Hill is now degraded like the hospital. It's almost like another reality of what the town was before. You remember the bar with the jukebox? Yeah, this is the same bar now, looking pretty rough. There is now writing above the jukebox that reads, "If you want to see Mary, you should just die, but you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James." The jukebox isn't playing any music. Instead, the sound of what I believe is breathing can be heard. Outside, we hear the sound of a telephone ringing. When we approach and answer, there is nobody on the other end. It does, however, give James a note and wrench, telling him to go back to the park with the praying woman. Our way back, however, is in a tunnel, which is never a great idea. I won't add one to the tally since James technically doesn't have a choice here. Actually, what am I talking about? The man should have climbed. Add another one. There are creatures with mouth hands hanging from the floor below. Who thinks of this crap, man? We get back to the garden and find Angela standing at the statue. James asks her if she's feeling better, but Angela mentions how different this place is than what she remembers. She doesn't think her mother is here anymore, saying that her mother doesn't want to see her anymore. James points out that he is happy to see her alive, which confuses her slightly. She tells him that she needs to leave, and James offers to join her, pointing out the fact that together they might actually have a chance of getting out of here. Once again, Angela is confused, asking James, get out of where? James says the town, get out of Silent Hill. Angela declines, saying that she'll be fine. She looks behind James at something and begins panicking and screaming that they shouldn't be here. James attempts to console her, asking what is wrong. He even touches her arm, which Angela violently pulls away, yelling at James to not touch her. She turns and runs out of the garden. We find the hidden box beneath the statue, a key with a note. It mentions James by name, praying that the Lord above will have mercy on his soul. Not ominous at all. The key is to the old historical society building on the west side of town, a kind of museum of Silent Hill history. Once inside, we can find a variety of interesting things, such as a painting of the Lady of the Lake statue from the garden, and a painting of the Pyramid Head Man, titled A Misty Day, Remains of the Judgment. We see the coal mine that the news article mentioned is having a bunch of supernatural activity, and of course the Brookhaven Hospital that we will still have nightmares from. At the end of the building is a tunnel heading down into what I can only describe as hell itself. Hell to the no. You know what? This is deserving of 2 tally points. Alright, the same siren as before is heard, so I'll count that as 1 as well. Just to put into perspective how long this damn staircase is, this is unedited running, folks. This is an underground lair on steroids. You could not pay me enough to go down here. We reach a building downstairs with photos on the wall. It shows the Toluca prison, which I guess this is kind of a part of, and it also shows some other questionable stuff that made me take a second look. We find a giant hole in the ground, and there is no other way around this place. Well, I guess we just need to make our way back up those stairs. No other option, really. James, what are you? Another tally point. So we're just jumping down holes where we can't even see the bottom now. That's what we're doing. How do you not turn into a blood and flesh splatter after you do a 50-foot fall? How do you even have ankles? We stumble into one of the rooms that is filled with beetles. Not to mention the door is now locked. I kind of feel he deserves it at this point, I gotta be honest. We manage to make our escape and find yet another hole in the ground that looks like it's about a 100-foot drop. And yeah, why not? James's bones need to be studied. We are now in a cafeteria area, with a man dead at a table. Nearby is Eddie, who is talking to himself about how easy it is to kill someone. James asks him who the man was, and Eddie responds that the man came at him. James clarifies the circumstances that happened, and it becomes more and more obvious that Eddie is not telling the whole truth, eventually saying that he shot him because he looked at him funny, and admitting that the guy never actually came at him. James is worried, telling Eddie that you can't just kill someone because they looked at you funny. But Eddie reinstates that he was clearly making fun of him, and now he learned his lesson before pointing the gun at James and begins laughing, saying that he is only joking and the guy was dead when he got here. He leaves alone, denying James help once again, this time with a smile on his face. I have a feeling that Eddie is not being very upfront about this guy. We are now within the Toluca prison, back to exploring. We can stumble across a monument at the prison gallows of two pyramid heads standing next to each other on either side of an executed prisoner. These guys are more famous than I give them credit for. Inside the prison chapel is an area for prisoners to confess their sins. And those hand clamps and feet spikes are telling me that there might have been some human rights violations that took place here. Just going to take a wild guess. This place as a whole is honestly a certified horror show. Now, there isn't all that much lore-based stuff throughout the prison area worth mentioning, but this is a significant portion of the game, and definitely not where I would want to serve my time. We get another hole in the wall, this time in the prison bathroom. That is definitely another one for the tally. You are just asking for trouble putting your hand in there. A book from the warden inside the infirmary mentions how prisoners within the place were getting sick from an unknown illness, with the staff doctors attempting to find out what is spreading around. A prisoner letter, however, mentions how the guards think that they are lepers now, and don't actually know why. But since they stay away, they're not complaining. Those two stories conflict. We'll get back to this. Another note from the warden mentions the emergency medical examination of the prisoners. It mentions how the report conclusions from doctors are simply incorrect, and reinstates that the prisoners are sick and must continue examinations until a diagnosis is found. We find that very report, stating that none of the prisoners show any clinical sign or symptom of a life-threatening illness, contagious or otherwise. Inside the warden's office is a typewriter with a page of paper with the only word sick written on the page. Something is up with this warden. We complete the puzzles and unlock the monument outside that has a variety of horror poems for our enjoyment. You essentially need to pair the second paragraph of the poem to the one that's already in place. The finished poems are as followed. For your grace, I do not plead. For the flames I did set free. Sisters shrieked and children cried. No one made it out alive. I watched them burn, I heard them cry. I felt a soothing warmth inside. It felt so good I cannot lie, and for my bliss they had to die. The wealth of others I did not take, the seventh statute I did not break, and yet my deeds I don't regret. I had my reasons, that is that. What were those reasons, you might ask? The truth allow me to unmask. I see, I crave, I need, I take. 'Tis all the sense it needs to make. I took the child, you are quite right, carried her off into the night. She did not scream, she did not bawl. I was her father after all. Forgive me, child, for I have failed to save you from her wretched way. She whom I loved, who gave you life, a monster hiding in plain sight. Once the sun has creased its reign, I cut through the rusty chain, pushed the door and snuck within, filled my pockets to the brim. I departed with great haste, leaving not a single trace, ever faithful to my creed, all is right which feeds my greed. Mummy dearest, mummy sweet, your love for me was so deep. Why, oh why, you shouted when my knife pierced through your heart. You were oh so kind to me, filled my heart with joy and glee. In the end it was for naught. Why, oh why, you ask? Why not? I waited so long, I bid my time. I waited to commit my crime. The man appears, he saw me not. A bloody end is what he got. In truth, he was less man than beast, and in my flesh and soul he'd feast. My will to live he'd try to break, but there is so much a man can take. Not vital to the story, but I thought the poems were cool, nonetheless, so I just wanted to share them. With the puzzle solved, there is only one thing to do. Nope, not that. Pull the noose. James is now underneath the prison with corpses moving? Huh? Are there zombies now? We find another hole in the floor and James gets another added to the tally. Make that 2. We are now in some kind of house complex. It's hard to say. Things are getting pretty weird now. We find a newspaper that describes a murder, but parts have been lost to decay. It mentions a man named Thomas Oro something. Not able to see the end of his last name. A lumberjack that was discovered dead at the age of 39. The cause was multiple stab wounds to the front of his neck and left side of his torso by a sharp-edged weapon. Time of death was near midnight, and there were signs of a struggle in the room with the murder weapon now missing. No cash was stolen, and with the victim's history of drunkenness and violence, the police do believe that the murder was not a robbery but instead a crime of passion. In a nearby room, we can hear the screams of Angela as she screams for her father to stop. When James arrives, Angela is telling him that she'll be good, pleading with James to tell her father that she will be good. James takes a look around, and we can see the thing that Angela is calling her father, and what is that, man? My god, it's like a bed creature of some kind with two entities in one. We manage to kill it and find a television of a man yelling. It's largely broken speech, but we can hear the man yelling that someone should be more grateful and to look at him. The creature arrives again as James flees into a hidden closet with a teddy bear and pictures of a family. Specifically Angela's family. Another television has the same man speaking, yelling at somebody for wanting to run away and leave, asking where they would go. Nobody cares about them. He knows what's best for them. We finally put this creature to bed, mind the pun, and Angela attacks it. James tries to calm her down, but Angela tells him not to try. He asks what she means. She tells him that it's always the same with him, and he's only after one thing. Telling him not to lie, go ahead and say it, before telling him that he could just force her like he always did, and she begins breaking down. This is probably one of the roughest parts of the story. It becomes very clear that Angela's father abused her, as she breaks down calling him a disgusting pig and stating just how much she hates him. James tells her that he doesn't want to hurt her, only to find his wife. Angela asked James to admit that he didn't want his wife around anymore, saying he probably found somebody else. This angers James, as he denies ever finding anybody. Angela leaves, with James still denying to himself ever wanting his wife gone. As we continue into the story, remember the news article I read before and the creature that we just killed. We'll be coming back to that later also. We reach a labyrinth with a wall of what I can only describe as souls blocking the path. A nearby corridor leads to a room with none other than Maria inside of it. James asks how she's still alive, saying that she was stabbed through the chest. But Maria calls James silly, saying that never happened, asking what he's talking about. Maria, now calling him honey, is asking if he's just confusing her with somebody else, saying that he was always so forgetful, reminding him of their time at the hotel, and how James thought that they actually had gotten everything but forgot the videotape that they had made, wondering if it's still there. James asks Maria how she knows about that, asking if she's actually Maria. She bluntly replies that she is not his Mary, but she can be whatever James wants her to be, or whoever. It doesn't matter who she is, but she is here for James in any way that he needs. If he makes up his mind, if he decides he wants her, she'll be waiting for him. James is a bit lost at this new version of Maria, before telling her that he'll come back, that he promises. We will come back to this later as well. Okay, this video is going to be very back heavy, since a lot of this doesn't make sense until some later reveals. The labyrinth is filled with all kinds of nasty creatures, dead ends, and of course Pyramid Head, but at the very end we manage to find the door to Maria. However, she is dead, covered in marks similar to a disease. James begins crying, mourning the loss, but before realizing what goal really matters, and that's finding his wife, Mary. We find Pyramid Head's weapon outside that James can use to keep the souls at bay and allow us to make an exit. We stumble across a graveyard with a bunch of headstones. One of them belongs to Miriam, the young girl killed in Silent Hill in the sibling murder. We also see Walter Sullivan, the man who murdered the siblings. Then there are three at the back, with graves dug but are currently empty. Angela Orozco, Eddie Dombrowski, and James Sunderland. James jumps into his own grave with his name on it. Definitely another one for the telly, my friend, that is just asking for bad news. Another long hallway leads to Eddie, yelling at a dead man on the ground, saying how he couldn't just leave him alone. He needed to follow him all the way out here. How many times does Eddie have to kill him? James surprises him, but asks what Eddie is doing. Eddie begins yelling insults about his weight and how he's meaningless. Maybe the guy is right, maybe he does mean nothing, maybe he is disgusting, but it doesn't matter if you're pretty, ugly, smart or dumb. In the end, it means all the same when you're dead, and a corpse can't laugh. He puts more bullets into the corpse. James tries to stop him, but Eddie turns his attention to James, saying how he must think the same thing about him, laughing at him behind his back. Ever since they first met at the apartment building, he has seen it all along, but James isn't laughing anymore before pointing the gun at his head. James gives Eddie a good right hook, and you know what, I'm going to take one off the tally for that decision, James, well done. James tells Eddie to calm down, but he points out to James that the town called him here also, so as not to act all high and mighty. They are the same. The town wanted them both. He jumps up and leaves, telling James that he's about to find out. We take a look around the room and we can see that the deceased is the same guy from the cafeteria. And there isn't just one more, but a handful of the same guy. We follow Eddie into the next room as he yells at James, asking him if he knows what it feels like to be picked on and treated differently just for how you look, admitting that he ran away after killing the dog, saying that it was fun. The dog even tried to eat its own innards before curling up into a ball and dying. Then he came after him, which Eddie shot him in the leg. He explains how the man cried more than the dog. Dude, I want Eddie dead. Okay, that dog story is enough for me. There is no saving this dude. Eddie wants to kill James and the two fight amongst the hanging meat. And I have to say, Eddie had a real future in the NFL if he wanted it. Guy is nimble. It takes a few times, but James finally manages to get a kill shot on Eddie, shooting him in the chest before he collapses to the ground. James, you are now a murderer, my guy. You know what? Another point off the tally for killing the dog killer. Well done. We finally reach the outside. And for you guys, this area would have been like 10-15 minutes on the video. For me, it was more like 3 to 4 hours. This change of scenery was sorely needed. James finds a nearby boat and begins rowing into the lake with a light behind him. Remember the story of the lady of the lake holding a lit candle to lead her love into the darkness towards her? In James's search for Mary, this is very reminiscent of the folklore seen in the Silent Hill legend, and in many ways parallels the story to a T. And as we get closer, the light gets brighter, with James arriving at the hotel near the Lakeview Hotel. Fitting. We make our way inside and find a note addressed to James, saying how the videotape that he left in their room during his last stay has been recovered and is ready to be returned to him at his earliest convenience. This fits perfectly to the story that Maria mentioned earlier, which caught James off guard. But how could she know about it? James gets a fright from a nearby piano, with the culprit being none other than Laura. James is actually playful for once, and jokes that he probably deserves it for how he's acted until now. Laura laughs and says maybe, but he isn't all that bad, he's just annoying. He continues to joke with her, saying that there's a dark room back there that she could lock him in again if she wanted, but she says that he's had enough for now. She asks James to help her find Mary, saying that she's in here somewhere, and asks James for confirmation. He tells her that he doesn't know, but Laura is confused since Mary said that she would be in her letter. This shocks James, now realizing that the letter that Laura mentioned earlier wasn't actually a lie. Laura gives him the letter, telling him not to tell Rachel, her nurse. I will play the clip of the letter uninterrupted since this is such a vital part of the story and the music and the voice acting is awesome.
My dearest Laura, I'm leaving this letter with Rachel to give to you after I'm gone. I'm far away now, in a quiet, beautiful place. Please forgive me for not saying goodbye before I left. Be well, Laura. Don't be too hard on the sisters. And Laura, about James. I know you hate him because you think he isn't nice to me, but please, give him a chance. It's true, he can be a little surly sometimes, and he doesn't laugh much. But underneath, he's a really sweet person. I love you, Laura. I love you like my very own daughter. I wish things were different. I wish we could be happy together, like we talked about. Even so, I know you will have a good life. You're a strong, smart, beautiful girl. Happy 8th birthday, Laura. Your friend, Mary.
James asks Laura how old she is, and she tells him that she just turned 8 last week. This means that Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago. Could she really be here? Could this be the special place that she mentioned in her letter? Laura tells him that Mary spoke to her a lot about Silent Hill and showed Laura her pictures. She really wanted to return here and spoke a lot about James as well to Laura, even writing him a letter that she gave to Laura. She admits that she wanted to hide it from James, saying that she didn't believe that he deserved it, but understands that Mary wouldn't want it kept from him, and gives him the letter. The envelope is empty, which horrifies Laura, saying that she never opened it. She tells James that she needs to find the letter and runs off. We continue looking around the hotel, which is also filled with creatures and nurse monsters. Nice. We can find a medical file for Mary on the desk in the nurse's office, along with a Cinderella statue in a nearby room. We are attacked by another creature with mouth hands and a mouth for a face. Again, I can't explain everything, unfortunately. After an hour or so of puzzles and exploring, we made our way to room 312, the room that Mary was said to be waiting inside. We used the videotape that James left at the hotel with the VCR player, and he sits down and watches the video. We see Mary in the same room speaking to James as he records her. She mentions how much she loves it at Silent Hill, how peaceful it is, saying that she heard this whole area was once a sacred place, and she can see why. She asks James to take her back here again before coughing. The video cuts to Maria on a bed as a man places a pillow over her head as she struggles to breathe, fighting for her life. That man is James, as it is now revealed that James was the one who killed his wife. She did not die from her sickness. Laura arrives asking where Mary is, and James tells her that Mary is dead. Laura asks if it was due to her illness, but James admits that it was him that killed her. Laura yells at James, saying that she knew he didn't care about her, stating how much she hated him, pointing out that Mary always waited for him. Why would he do it? James tells her that the Mary that she knew isn't here any longer, and Laura runs out the room crying. We see that James has sat thinking about the truth for a while, with the hotel now degrading much like the hospital in town. Mary yells out over the radio, asking for James to find her, asking if he hates her, asking why he won't come, begging him not to leave her out here. He goes to look for her through the now destroyed hotel, ending up in a familiar but destroyed places. He enters a room on fire with Angela looking at a castrated man on the wall, smiling. She mistakes James for her mother, but realizes that it's just James. He apologizes to Angela, saying that he thinks that she was right all along. What they are looking for is not here anymore. Angela thanks James for helping her earlier, but wished that he hadn't. She deserved what happened, just like her mother said. She asks James to give her back the knife, which James refuses to do. She asks him if he's saving it for himself, to which he doesn't respond. She turns around saying that the knife changes nothing anyway. James points out how hot it is in here, before Angela asks if he sees it too, explaining that it's always like this for her. James leaves and enters a fighting pit. Above is Maria hanging upside down on a grate, and James pleads to the pyramid heads to leave her alone. They stab her once again, killing her while James watches on. James mentions that he knows what they are, and why he needed them. But now that it's all over, he doesn't need them any longer. The two come down and a fight between the three begins. Before the fight can end, both of the pyramid heads impale themselves on their spears before cornering James, offering him the components to enter the final room. As he wanders down the hallway, he hears Mary's voice once again in a flashback. She asks why James is here, saying how she doesn't want his flowers. She is disgusting. Between the illness and the drugs, she looks like a monster. She tells James to get the hell out of here, leave her alone already. She is no use to anyone. She'll be dead soon anyway. It would be easier to just kill her, but the hospital is making a good profit off of her. She yells a final time, fighting through tears for James to leave and to never come back. We reach the final room and we can see Mary looking out the window, dressed in her familiar outfit. The two hug as James states how much he missed her. She mentions how the two can now be together forever. James refuses, saying how Mary is gone, saying he knows how much she tried, but she is gone and he cannot continue pretending. It is revealed that this is actually Maria, stating that she can be better than Mary ever was, giving him things that she could never give. She asks what he wants her to be, but James finally tells her that this needs to stop. It's time to let it go. Maria tells him bluntly no, that she will not let him do this to her, and she will not let him go. Oh my, we have ourselves another creature. We manage to beat Maria and finish her off for good as we cut back to James sitting in his car from the beginning of the game. He apologizes to Maria, saying how much he tried but he just cannot go on without her, and he cannot forgive himself for what he did. He knows that it isn't what she would want, but it doesn't matter any longer since she isn't here anymore. He looks back, revealing Maria's body lying in the back seat of the car. He turns the car on and drives it through the railing and off the cliff into the lake. Our final scene is Mary's note sinking into the lake while she narrates over.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. But you never did. Well, I'm alone there now. In our special place. Waiting for you to come and see me. But you never do. So, I wait. Wrapped in my cocoon of pain and loneliness. I know, I've done a terrible thing to you. I wish I could change that, but I can't. I feel so pathetic and ugly laying here. Every day I stare up at the cracks in the ceiling, and all I can think about is how unfair it is. The doctor came today. Told me I could go home for a short stay. It's not that I'm getting better. It's just that this could be my last chance. Even so, I'm glad to be coming home. I missed you so much. But I'm afraid, James. I'm afraid you don't really want me to come home. Every time you come to see me, I can tell how hard it is on you. I don't know if you hate me or pity me. Maybe I just disgust you. I'm so sorry. When I first learned I was gonna die, I couldn't accept it. I was so angry. I struck out at everyone I loved. Especially you. And that's why I understand if you hate me. But I want you to know, I will always love you. Even though our life together had to end like this, I still wouldn't trade it for the world. Well, this letter has gone on too long, so I'll say goodbye. I told the nurse to give this to you after I'm gone. Which means that as you're reading this, I'm already dead. But that's okay. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I just hope the pain will end soon. So that you remember me for who I was. And not what the disease made me. I want you to go on. I want you to live. For yourself. And for others. Like you did for me. James. You made me happy.
And with that ends the story of Silent Hill. Now don't go anywhere, this video is far from over. We have a lot to cover and give context to the story, and what actually happened, and why everything happened, and what it all meant. Since I am sure a good amount of you are completely confused right now. Firstly, there are 8 endings to the Silent Hill 2 game. And the one that you just saw is called the inwater ending. Now, you might be wondered why I chose this ending to show first. Well, I did some research, and there is no definitive ending to Silent Hill 2, due to the variety of them. The in-water ending has been described by many fans and even some developers over the years as being the most theatrical and fitting ending to the game's story, hence why I used it here. But we will cover all the other 7 endings so you can take a pick at your favourite. Then we'll provide some context to the story. I want to shout out Mallow on YouTube, link in the bio, for getting the footage of all the other endings and saving me tens of hours of work getting each one myself. You are a godsend. We begin with the Bliss ending. This takes place before the final boss and simply shows the peaceful vacation that James and Maria had at Silent Hill, without revealing his murder of her. We see the two embrace after good times, and James proclaiming to the camera that everything is fine. A revealing shot shows that James is no longer in the chair. The Rebirth ending shows James rowing his boat with Mary's body with him as he apologizes for waking her, saying how peaceful she looks, but he can't live without her. He mentions that the old gods that still look over this place grant power to those who follow them. He intends to resurrect Mary using a ritual. The next is the Maria ending. It shows her as Mary confronting James about his murder of Mary. James states how he couldn't see her suffer any longer. She makes James admit that he actually resented Mary, hated her, which he admits to having some of those feelings since it was a long 3 years. He was tired. The boss fight ensues, but afterwards we see Maria awaken at the strip club with James helping her up. She gives James the letter from Mary, but he doesn't even read it, telling Maria that it's time to go. The two get back to his car as Maria begins coughing. James points out needing to do something about that cough. This ending shows James forgetting Mary and choosing to continue on with a new life with Maria, choosing to ignore the lessons he learned along his journey, and with the cough, signaling that he might just be making the same mistake again with Maria. We now have the leave ending. This shows a flashback to Mary sick on her deathbed with James sitting alongside her. He apologizes to her, but she tells him that she wanted the pain to end and not to blame himself. He tells her that he knows that she wanted it to end, but it's not why he did it. The truth is that he hated her. He wanted her out the way. He wanted his life back. Mary asks him why he looks so sad if that's true. She hands him a note telling him that it's what he's been waiting for. We cut to Laura drawing on a wall as James meets with her. He gives her the letter that he received from Mary. It is the same letter that we hear at the end of the Inwater ending. At the end of the narration, we see Laura and James leaving Silent Hill together. Next is the stillness ending. It shows James in his car telling Mary about how he cannot go on without her. But this time she is alive, asking him what is wrong. James begins crying, proclaiming how much he has missed her and how sorry he is. She tells him that it's okay. She has always been waiting for him. As he looks down at the letter alongside him, it cuts to black as we hear him once again driving into the lake. This one allows James to receive his forgiveness directly from Mary, not needing to read the letter. We now have the two comical endings that are definitely not canon in any way, but it's fun nonetheless. We see James outside of room 312 as he holds a gem to the skies. A UFO can be seen above him, and he is now seeing his old original Silent 2 model. There is Space James and aliens working together, and Space James is also looking for Space Mary? It's a whole thing. The final ending shows James reaching a control room. However, it is a Shiba Inu dog behind the control panels. The dog is the master. The dog controls everything. All hail our dog overlord. Anyway, where was I? Those are the 8 endings of Silent Hill 2. Again, thematically, Inwater is considered the most appropriate, but there is actually no official canon ending. So I want anyone that made it this far into the video to write the ending which was their favorite. Here are the endings' names, and let me know so I can see. Okay, let's get into some context. Firstly, did any of this happen? Was it a dream? Was it imagined? Was it real? If so, who was real? Now, we are definitely getting into some theory territory here, since we cannot know for certain, but I feel pretty solid on some things. Firstly, the town of Silent Hill. It is mentioned in newspapers like we saw that the town has recorded supernatural capabilities, not to mention that the town was built on sacred Indian land. This points to me that Silent Hill serves as almost a conduit for somebody's grief or troubles, calling in people and showing them things that are appropriate to them. So for example, there are only 4 real people in Silent Hill 2, all of which have been called to the town for different reasons. The first is James, the second is Angela, the third is Eddie, and the fourth is Laura. Let's begin with Angela Orozco. We see Angela at the beginning in the graveyard, looking for her mother, while pointing out her father and brother should be around here but she cannot find them. I mentioned how she looked at the gravestones when she said this, which suggests that they could be dead. This is confirmed in the news article that I read before we find Angela with her father. The article describes a man named Thomas Oro. The rest of the last name is missing, but the last name is Orozco. He was stabbed to death with no belongings taken. The murder done in passion. This was an article describing what Angela did to her father, her abuser, and it also hinted that her brother may have been abusing her as well, which means that Angela killed both of them. It explains that the murder weapon was never found. Well, that's because the knife is in possession of Angela. Or well, it was until she handed it to James to hold on to. She mentions to James how her mother told her that she deserved everything that happened to her, which suggests that Angela was not just trying to find her mother, but was trying to kill her as well. Her reaction to being touched on the arm by James is explained by the trauma that she had by her brother and her father, and the sudden outburst at something that James did not see was well because only she could see it. The town acts as a conduit, showing each person what they need to see, but at times these things seem to cross over, and they can peer into each other's worlds, if you will. An example of this is when Angela is speaking with the creature that she called Daddy. I described this creature at the time as a bed creature, because that is what it is. There is one figure above another figure on what seems to be a bed. It should be obvious what this is representing. This is a creature created in the mind of Angela, a creature of her father. You put the two together and it's equally as disgusting as it is sad. Another instance is when James finds Angela in the burning room. He tells her how hot it feels, as she mentions to him that it's always like that for her. This is the world that Angela sees within Silent Hill. Much like the broken down version of the world that James sees, to her the world is a burning inferno, much like the hatred and the trauma that's held within her. Briefly, James was able to visit these places which should have only been available and to be seen only by Angela. Now for Eddie Dombrowski. Eddie is severely mentally unstable, this being because of the years of being bullied for his weight and appearance. This has led him to be laughed at and ridiculed for much of his life. At the point in which he finds himself in Silent Hill, he is essentially a serial killer, willing to kill anybody that laughs at him, finally taking revenge back for all those years of torment. We see the individual in the cafeteria. This is someone that Silent Hill has mustered from Eddie's mind, destined to continue following him, laughing at him, making fun of him. This is why we see so many of the same corpses, sent to endlessly mock Eddie as he kills each of them and becomes more and more unstable in the process. Eddie's world takes the form of that meat locker. It's cold, it's dark, it's lightless, filled with big clumps of meat hanging from hooks. This is likely showing just how dark Eddie's mind is, his lack of remorse, and the flesh is a sign of his insecurity of his weight and gluttonous nature. Then there's Laura, a young orphan girl called to Silent Hill in memory of her one true friend Mary, who told her stories about the place that she wanted to visit again before she died. But Mary didn't get that chance, so Laura went for her. Laura treated James poorly at the beginning, because she heard stories from Mary that painted him in a bad light. But Laura is only 8 years old. She is still innocent, not holding any guilt or trauma like the other three, showing bunnies and dogs. It's all happy scenery. This is in stark contrast to the surroundings that we see through James's eyes. But this is because Laura is not seeing the same thing as James. Remember the scene where James tells Laura that it isn't safe and that it's dangerous? Well, this is because for James it was dangerous. He was seeing creatures everywhere that he went within Silent Hill. But did you ever wonder how a young 8-year-old girl was able to run around all these places without ever getting attacked, killed, or chased? Well, it's because there was no creatures for Laura. She didn't have monsters. It was just the town. This is because of her innocence. Unlike the others who were brought to Silent Hill for their past deeds, Laura went on her own volition for a friend, with absolutely no baggage. Now for James. There are a lot of layers to James. Firstly, the reason he believes his wife died 3 years ago to the disease is actually semi-revealed at the end of the game. He mentions to Mary that it was a long 3 years, and that he grew a resentment towards her as a result. This suggests that Mary dealt with her illness for 3 years, and we know that she died shortly before the events of Silent Hill 2, only a few days before, which means that deep down James considered his wife dead the minute she got her disease. Not the moment that she died. His wife didn't die 3 years ago, she got her disease 3 years ago, which gives some insights into the way of his thinking. We see numerous clues throughout Silent Hill that suggest that everything is not what it seems, like Mary's clothing on the mannequin with the flashlight. I believe this is not a coincidence. We already saw a reference between James and Mary and the story of the woman of the lake, how the woman would stand each night at the beach with a candle to light the way for her love, waiting for him. The flashlight on her dress is the first clue of that. The candle lighting the way for her love. We hear numerous times how Mary would wait for James to visit her but realizes how hard it is or was for him to see her like that. But she waited for him just the same, just like the lady of the lake. And much like the man who got lost in the storm, James lost his way too, beginning to hate his wife, letting his selfish thoughts come through. Now for Maria. Maria is not real, and she never was. We know this since Maria was never acknowledged by any other living character. She wasn't inside the movie theater when James met up with Eddie and Laura again. She was around, however, when Laura fled the movie theater and when Laura was on the staircase, but neither time did Laura ever acknowledge her, or even bring her up to James. She wasn't present when James met with Laura on the 3rd floor. She was a manifestation of Mary in James's head. It's why she resembled her so much and had a similar voice. We can see that Maria had memories of Mary throughout as well, like the time that she mentions that she didn't know why she felt responsible for Laura's well-being. This was a nod towards Mary's real feelings towards Laura, or the time that she brought up the lost videotape. We know that this tape was referring to the one that James watched at the end of the hotel, but we can also see that it was Mary who was with James, not Maria. The different creatures that James saw along the way suggest different perceptions that he had of Mary and those around her, like the nurses. Not to mention Pyramid Head. James points out that he knows what they were, but he doesn't need them anymore. I think Pyramid Head was most likely his own guilt, fighting to punish himself over killing Mary. It's only when he has accepted his guilt and his role that they eventually impaled themselves. He was finally ready to see Mary again. Obviously, this turned out to be Maria, but it's almost like Silent Hill was testing to see if James actually learned his lesson, accepting his role and guilt and was ready to move on, something that Angela and Eddie failed to do. In the end, he wasn't able to move on if you go by the in-water ending, as I have. But he did return Mary to Silent Hill one last time, just like he promised. Now, do you remember the 3 patient letters at the hospital? Patient 50, patient 90, patient 130? I believe these patients were actually nods to the 3 main patients of Silent Hill. Patient 50, sudden outbursts of aggression, visual and auditory hallucinations with a sudden decline in mental stability. This, I believe, was referring to James Sunderland. Patient 90, sensory delusions, insomnia, not drinking or eating. This fits more closely with Angela and her demeanor as she deals with the killing of her family and the trauma that she now has to live with. And patient 130, intense and unrelenting anxiety with paranoia, visual hallucinations. We saw firsthand Eddie's paranoia, always believing that people were laughing at him behind his back, and the anxiety of his weight and self-esteem issues. This does not mean, however, that I thought that they were patients at the hospital. I want to state that now. But I think that it was a nod towards the 3 characters. With all of that said, there is no definitive answer, and while I do feel strongly about my theory and the evidence that I've built, I would love to hear your thoughts if I'm correct or if you think there's something else. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to see them. This entire video was an absolute treat to make, and I hope it was equally enjoyable to watch. Be sure to like the video as it helps me tremendously, and subscribe for more Story Explained videos just like this in the near future. Expect some Diablo videos out in the next few days. Diablo 4 DLC just released, and I'll be getting into that pretty much now. Thanks again guys for the support, it means a lot. Until next time, peace.